Writing the West. Stories and poems by Rick Stever. Read by Michael Messner and friends. Daredevil of the Sky. Silas Christopherson introduced the West to aviation. He was a daredevil of the sky. He established a world distance record flying 302 miles between San Francisco and Los Angeles, and the world altitude record with a 14,500-foot flight over Mount Whitney. But Silas is best known for his death-defying stunt, attempting to fly off the roof of the Multnomah Hotel during the 1912 Portland Rose Festival. Asked why he was willing to attempt such a feat, Silas replied,
"I will be the first in the history of aviation. It was only 9 years ago that the Wright brothers first flew. I am not unaware of the danger, but I have every confidence in myself."
The airplane, patterned after the Curtiss pusher with an engine and propeller mounted behind the pilot, was dismantled and hauled up the outside of the hotel with ropes. It was reassembled at one end of a platform built on the roof. June 11, 1912 dawned gray and drizzly. A crowd of 50,000 spectators jammed downtown streets. Some leaned precariously from windows or hung from fire escapes, craning their necks to catch a glimpse as Silas settled himself at the controls of his airplane. He nodded his head, the propeller was spun, and the motor roared to life. Silas released the brake, and the flimsy kite-like craft shot down the runway. The plane was at the edge of the roof, where either a flight or a fatality had to occur. The crowd gave a collective gasp and then wildly cheered for the Daredevil. Silas disappeared into the clouds. He flew over the Columbia River, and 12 minutes later he touched down on the polo grounds at the Vancouver Army Barracks. Mules. Oswald West visited Klamath Falls in the summer of 1905 and reported,
"I found myself in that town on business connected with a state land office. While taking an after-dinner stroll along Main Street, I was to witness what to me was a distressing performance. A couple of cowhands, well liquored up, were exhibiting an undersized, half-broken, footsore team of mules hitched to a top buggy. They would race them up and down the street to demonstrate how quickly they could be stopped in front of a saloon where drinks would be ordered. Seeing that the abused animals needed a friend, I made inquiries as to whether they were for sale. Being told that the outfit was for sale, at $450, I informed the gentleman I was not interested in the buggy and harness, only the mules. The deal, therefore, appeared to be off."
West said that later that night he was awakened by a loud knock at his door. It was the cowhands offering the mules a loan for $80 plus $10 that night. He agreed, paid the $10, and the cowhands went off to get more whiskey.
In the morning, unfortunately, I discovered the mules had not been broken to ride. Now, this necessitated my hiring a saddle nag, and the only one available was somewhat advanced in years, stiff in the shoulders and unshod. An old hornless stock saddle supplied was quite in keeping with the horse. I rode this animal to within about 15 miles of Ashland before it became footsore and weary. So I removed the saddle and bridle and hiked on, leading my two mules.
The mules were shipped by train from Ashland to Salem and were turned out to pasture. Oswald West went on to become the 14th governor of the state of Oregon. Standing at Sallahie. From the flanks, folds, and jaded peaks of the high Cascades, below the snowfields and the jumble of black lava, water tumbles over granite ribs and a backbone of basalt, joining forces to become the mighty Mackenzie River. The current scours out a deep, rocky chasm, leaving the banks untouched, current playing with roots of trees and flowers and the mosses held there. Water shimmers and leaps off a high ledge. A showy waterfall with a native name, Sallahie, meaning high, gathers below in a boiling pool of white and blue, bleeds off once again to resume becoming a river tumbling headlong to join forces with the broad Pacific Ocean. An arcing rainbow of bright colors hangs over the falls, wavers ever so slightly in the changing slant of sunlight. He stands, shivering, drenched by cold spray and gray mist, reverently praying to the God who created such beauty. Lucky Hans. It was the last day of summer vacation. Hans Hansen and a friend were determined to make the most of it, so they went on a fishing trip above the big falls on Cook Creek. Their theory was that the trout would be bunched up there. The boys crawled through the thick undergrowth and were near enough that they could hear the distant roar of the falls. Hans was smaller and could move more quickly than his friend. He reached the creek and called back,
Perfect! I am right here at the top of the falls.
Hans selected a straight willow and used his jackknife to cut it off. He tied the line on the narrow end and was concentrating on skewering a fat worm on the hook, when he had a strange sensation that he was being watched. Expecting to see his friend, he turned and was shocked to see a tawny-colored mountain lion. The cat snarled, hissed, and showed its sharp teeth. Hans stood up, stepped back, and caught his heel on an exposed root. He lost his balance and fell into the stream. Hans flailed wildly with his arms and kicked with his feet as the swift current swept him downstream. At the very brink of the falls, Hans was poised for an instant, and then the rushing water pushed him over the edge. As he plunged downward, Hans never gave up trying to swim up the column of falling water. His effort proved futile, and he was slammed into the boiling pool. Tons of white water pushed him down, and an underwater volcano seemed to roar in his ears. He was almost out of air when he suddenly shot to the surface. The next day at school, when the teacher asked the students what they had done on their vacations, Hans had a fantastic story to tell. The Long Trail. Richard Helm came over the Oregon Trail with his parents in 1845. When he was of age to attend college, he enrolled in Willamette University.
After attending the university for 3 years, my father told me to take up Hebrew as he wanted me to be able to read the Bible in its original form. He planned for me to be a preacher. Now, this scared me out. I didn't want to preach, so I stopped school, loaded some grub and tools on my pack horse, mounted my riding horse, and started east. I was at Boise when the first tents were put up there. In the spring of 1863, I drove a herd of cattle to Fort Simcoe, and the following year drove 450 head to the Klickitat Valley. I kept them there until the spring, and we sold them for $22,000. In 1880, I drove a herd of cattle to Cheyenne, Wyoming, for shipment to eastern markets. For 37 years, I bought and sold cattle. Much of that time, my saddle was my pillow, and the sky was my cover. I was like the nomads of old. I had no settled habitation.
Helm went on to say that in all his life, he had never consumed alcohol or any form of tobacco. He did acknowledge that he drank coffee as a young man, but that he had abstained from that too for the last several decades.
I will tell you a rather remarkable thing about my outdoor life. I have gone for days when trailing cattle with my clothes wringing wet, have slept in wet blankets, have forded swollen streams, And although I am 85 years of age, I have never yet had occasion to visit a doctor.
You've been listening to Writing the West. The stories and poetry in this podcast are by Rick Steber and appear in books by him. Log on to www.ricksteberauthor.com to find out more. This program was produced by Michael Messner by permission of the author. Special thanks to Michael Tucker and Art Shingler. Thank you for listening.